Okay, let's begin this entry into the guide about mask cults with the following warning. If you walk into a chop shop in 2123 and ask that proprietor to give you a skin that sparkles in the sunlight, the real vampires are going to kick your arse. In the late 1980s to the early 2000s, there was a fad that forever marked the subcultures of the world, that of the vampire and the paranormal romance. Soon musicians, video games, role-playing games, comics, and movies were all being crafted about the vampire lover. From Anne Rice's iconic The Vampire Lestat to campy depictions such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Angel and Spike, to shudderingly bad renditions as Stephenie Meyer's Edward. The vampire, once just a cast-off character of Bram Stoker, was now here to stay. And I know what you're thinking to yourself. Cyber vamps? Really? Yes, really. The vampire movement of the technocratic dark future is a simple one. They usually begin by seeking out a domain and petition to join that group. If granted, they may then wear the domain's pen to show their membership. Surgeries to adapt their body to a diet of hemoglobin and give their skin the pallor of death. Also, surgeries to remove their scent and sharpen their sight and hearing will follow. Though the cult does not go for obviously metallic cyberware, smooth chromeness is a rarity amongst them. It will use all manner of bioware to augment their strength, healing, and other abilities. A few have even inducted their children into this movement, splicing predatory genes into their bodies from an early age, fating them to a life in the vampire cult. There is nothing illegal about being a vampire mass cultist in 2123. So I can hear that second question you're asking yourself. Well, then where do they get the blood? Many vampire masks don't have any real violence in their souls. They take a ration from the slaughterhouses the domain owns and sit around the club being uber cool and writing bad poetry while smoking clove cigarettes. The king of a domain often earns a sizable portion of his income from this source. Vampires will often court non-vampire members to become dolls of their domain and suck blood from them with their consent. Due to the antigens and other substances in the bloodstream, they cannot simply use the blood of other vampires, though vampires drinking each other's blood as an erotic bonding experience does occur. And then there's the murders. Whenever a murder takes place, if there are any vampire maskers in an area, they get a nice little chat from the local police department. Well, so long as the victim was someone that people would miss. The homeless victims of vampires, the runaways, the drug addicts, these hardly ever see any justice, unless it comes from a gang. Such as if the murdered happened to be a criminal, say a banger girl, and her boyfriend comes looking for some retribution. Then the criminals might just sort it out for themselves and make it a point to do the vamps one better, slaughtering any vamps of the domain that happen to be nearby to make a point. Because of this, many vampires are paranoid and prone to pop fangs and cyber claws at a moment's notice. It does not change the fact that this is mostly for show, and everyone knows it, unless you happen to meet what they call a Vlad. Named after Vlad Tepes, these are vampires that have absolutely no issue about using violence, nor any moral quandaries about going to it immediately. Many have already altered their body extensively, and a few are actually full conversion cyborgs covered in a real skin overlay. Vlads, as the vamps have seen, are those with the most combat experience, either from the streets or the military, and they love to fight. One Vlad in particular, Ramazi Kirchau, is feared by those that would harm his mask kin. Kirchau used to be a Russian Spetsnaz before being fully converted due to a sled accident. When he left service, he met a vamp that he felt hopelessly in love with. Unfortunately for him and his lover, there was a murder in Prague that month that seemed to be committed by a vampire. The mob tore his lover apart. Seriously, they ripped her apart in the middle of a Prague square. They had to actually use forklifts to do it. But Mr. Narrator, I hear you ask, there is no Prague on your world map of 2123's geography. Yes. Kirchhoff saw to that. And this is the sign of his passing, a pair of fangs with the Cyrillic K in between them. Often confused with vampires because of their love of elder dress, is a group that would really like the clock to be turned back some. Because not everyone thinks that the technological advancements of the past century were a good thing. Vics, short for Victorians, fall into this category. They are a mask gang that doesn't alter their bodies to look like any particular celebrity, but they do adore the dress and technology of the Victorian era, at least as they understand it. If they do get cyberware, such as a cyber arm, it will be styled with bright brass and hiss steam. Vics have their own subdivisions. The Jensen dames prefer the early Victorian era with its stodgy British dress and refinements. Pardners, also called guachos in the South American Union, or cowboy in Japan and Australian outbacks, have a more rough look. And this emphasis for this group is a bit of emphasis on historical knowledge and accuracy, academics, cultural skills, survival traits in the wild, that kind of thing. Picture a group of steampunk-loving RPGers that would usually go in the 2000s and reenact a LARP in the woods, but now living by that standard 24/7, with the accompanying Victorian ethics. As a group, Vics are involved in only two kinds of crime. Jensen dames prefer hacking, and cowboys, well, there's no other word for it. They like strong-arming and rustling. It isn't uncommon to see the cowboys roll into town on their old-fashioned motorcycles, or literally ride in on horses. Some Jensen dames have their hover cars remodeled to even look like ancient coaches, minus the horses that would normally accompany them, and go nowhere without the proper attire of top hat and cane. Amongst themselves, the groups adhere closely to the ancient manners that they revere. Guachos live by the code of the West, never asking questions about a man's past and seldom speaking, preferring to let their actions show their worth, while Jensen dames seek to use the most refined speech, eloquence, and keep proper decorum at all times, never allowing the outside world to see them flustered. Dueling, either with swords, knives, or pistols, is a common challenge amongst this group.